This conference will now be recorded.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but when people go in the post office and read all that stuff on the board, everybody gets all stacked up in the line.
There are those of us that don't have to go to the post office.
Austin was just getting ready to join.
Okay. Come on, Austin.
Thanks, Chad.
Chad, is Cheryl okay? I mean, it's not health or anything.
Yeah, no, it's for health reasons, but it's all for good stuff. So she's in recovery, and
As long as she's
she'll be
not
back here.
okay, good.
I'm sure she wouldn't mind me telling you. She just had a hip replacement.
Oh,
Hey, Chad. Oh,
I knew it, so I don't think she'd mind.
no,
so,
she intended to be back by the 3rd.
Friday. Are you going to be around?
Here's Austin. Okay.
Hey, sorry guys.
30 lashes with a wet noodle there, Austin.
I thought it was at 7 for some reason.
You young people just can't be trusted. Okay, it's 6:04. I'm going to call the meeting to order of the City of Gerhart Planning Commission meeting for May 13th. All commission members are present either on video or on phone. We have a consent agenda that includes minutes, the financial report, and correspondence, and you've all been receiving some copies of correspondence today, yesterday, and maybe the day before. So do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, so David moved and Russ seconded. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
David moved and Russ seconded to accept the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. All right, moving on. Reports, staff. That would be Carol or Chad.
Chad, do you have anything you'd like to add tonight?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. Thank you very much. So we have just a few things going on. Building department, so far we've had enough, as many building permits come through the city of Gerhart as we did all last year. And that's just since January. So it's been quite, the city has been definitely hopping, trying to take care of all of those things. Of course, the building department reviews all plans, but so does Public Works, Fire, and Code Enforcement myself. So that's been going on. And the other thing about this is a lot of these lots are some of the last lots around Gerhart, so they've been very difficult to get to. Water lines aren't there, you know, all sorts of access issues. So that's also kept us busy. But things are running smoothly.
Speak up a little bit.
Can I speak up?
Does anybody agree with that? No,
I can speak. Can you hear me okay?
it's hard to hear you.
It's your voice.
Well, I'll try to shout at the thing here. So building permits are up over last year. We've had just as many so far this year as we did all of last year. Reviewing those building permits and making sure things are going right have taken a lot of time, but it seems to be working out pretty smoothly. We have been working with the fire station relocation issue. We've begun getting some information from Geotech's planning group, working with Carol and Peter and some architects. So we're just kind of ironing out some of the details. But if we keep moving forward as we are and we get some good information and the council so chooses, we should make the November ballot because things are going fairly smoothly there. At this point, that is all that I have.
Okay.
One more thing,
yeah.
sorry. The parks, the mayor's, where she's asking for donations for the parks and the kids' play equipment. Berkeley collected a lot of coins for sure. We had them counted, and I'm going to let the mayor talk about that here tomorrow. But all told, with all the donations from various people, I think we're up to about 31.
You're wavering.
Just donations from the area. So I think that's really great.
Sorry,
Still can't
Chad,
hear me, Jenny?
we're not being able to understand you. Any of us are. So someplace, whatever you said, how much they had, we'll guess. That was $2 million they had, was that correct?
30.
Oh,
30,000.
30,000. Okay, do you have anything, Carol?
Austin, if you want, I'll just say we've once again had another Parks Advisory Committee meeting since the last Planning Commission meeting, and we're kind of wrapped up the survey results. Austin's put a lot of extra time in it to summarize all the comments and how many said what, and it's very detailed. So the next step is to start to synthesize those comments and ideas into some project lists. We'll be doing that next week's meeting, start talking about projects and improvements and park planning.
I have a question. What happened? Did the Carl Anderson money, did you receive money, and how much, and what's it going to be used for?
Chad would know that. I know he's received some. I don't know where he went right now.
Yeah, it hasn't been deposited. Some of us have got checks out there floating around.
Yeah.
I have heard.
Yeah.
So wherever Chad went, sayonara, I guess. I don't know. Oh, everyone left. Okay. Anything else, Carol?
No, that's all for now.
Okay. Austin, did you want to add anything about the Parks Advisory Committee?
No, not really.
Okay. So any other comments from any of the commissioners? I can't see hands or anything. You need to speak up.
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Wait, Jenny?
Yeah.
Jenny, this is Steph.
Yeah, I can see you.
I'm one of the people with the checks sitting out there still, and I wrote it a month ago, so I kind of like to know what's up.
Okay.
This is Terry. My check's sitting out there a month ago, too.
Okay.
Maybe that's where Chad went.
That's right.
He's on his way to Mexico.
I went on a trip to Tillamook. Now, Chad can hear us. I know he can still hear us. So, hopefully, why don't I'll follow up tomorrow for the Planning Commission, follow up with the office there and see what's going on for us.
He'll probably be back on.
Okay.
Because we need him for the maps.
Okay. Okay.
I'm back. I just was having some connection issues. So I will also get the report. Christy has the information on the checks that were written. They were holding them aside prior to depositing them. So they should be, or most of them. So we'll get a tally out to you via email tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, Chad.
I have a question for Chad.
Yes, David.
Chad, can I get a hold of you tomorrow regarding Carl Anderson details?
Sure.
You going to be in the office?
Yeah, I'll be in and out, but you know how to get a hold of me.
Okay, I'll contact you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
David, once you meet with Chad, could you kind of send us a text or smoke signals or email or something? What happened with
Yes.
the checks, how much money we have and where it's going to go and that sort of thing?
Gary, regarding that money, that is going to be sent to you by Christy, our assistant, tomorrow. So she'll send you that.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
I will follow up also.
All right.
Okay.
If it is okay with the commissioners, I would like to move the discussion of the goals list down to where we discussed concerns of the commission under new business. since that goals list and those concerns are interrelated. If there's no objection, we'll save that discussion till just a little later.
Okay with me.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Visitors comments. I see we've got a lot of visitors. Do any of you have anything to say that is not related to agenda items? And if you do, you'll need to unmute yourself because I can't see you. Dead silence? Okay. Moving on to public hearings. I have a note. Where'd my note go? I lost my note. Just wait a minute. That's what happens when you have way too many notes here. Well, I lost my note. As we know, Mr. Banta has asked us to postpone the hearing on the land partition. And so I need someone to make a motion to take it up on the 10th of June.
Before
I
you do
move
that,
we take it up on the 10th of June.
okay. Perfect. Is there a second?
Second,
I'll
Terry.
second it.
Because Mrs. Chair, may I just mention two things to get on the
Yes.
record for this?
Yes.
Okay. So this will be the third extension postponement, and I haven't received anything in writing yet, but John Banta did say yesterday that he would write a one sentence email or letter to the city waiving the 120-day rule so that we don't have to try and keep track of the 120 days. He expects to be back in June, and he's out of town is the reason today. So I just wanted everybody to know the whole story there.
Okay. So the motion we have, I'm going to paraphrase this for you, Russ, since I did find my notes finally. At the request of the applicant, the public hearing on the Banta partition is again continued to June 10th, 2021. The applicant has agreed in writing to waive the 120 rule in its entirety. Russ, you may not know that's the motion you made, but you did. So
Sounds exactly what I was thinking.
I know it is. Okay. So Russ made the motion and Stephanie, I believe you seconded it. That's the first hand I saw. Do we have any further discussion about this? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. All right. Moving on. We don't have anything under unfinished business, but we do have two things under new business, and we also have the goals list. At this point, I'm going to need to look to some direction from Carol because this has become rather complicated. As you all know, we've received lots of correspondence this week, and I'm sure we've had many questions. So Carol, are we best to discuss these concerns first, then go to the goals list, or is it better to go to the goals list first and then these matters?
I think we'll do the goals list later when you understand what these other two matters might entail. And it'll help us sort out the timeline of what the priorities of the goals.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. All right, so Carol, I know you are dying to talk about the possible A2 zone amendment considerations. I turn the floor to you.
Thank you, Mrs. President. And I do want to acknowledge the 4 letters we received from Judy and Gaylord Davis, from, is it Jeffrey Strange, from Claire McIntyre, and from Brian and Maureen Fennerty. And
There was John
that's
Dudley.
all. Oh. I
And John-
thought I,
It was sent out with the picture. We know you
Yeah.
saw it.
oh, the picture, you're right, I didn't write that down. Okay, thank you. And from John Dudley, who sent the photograph of the east portion of Little Beach and the residential uses there.
Carol, it
So,
wasn't just a photograph, it was a long letter.
Followed by a letter. Thank you. And I think, anyway, hopefully you've all had a chance to read them. There's a pretty strong sentiment. These people and their comments and their properties are all east of Hager, access from Hager and east towards Neocoxie Creek. So that's I think we can see these almost separate pods of property on the A2 zone. There's that section. And then there's, which is zoned R1, which we need to talk about. And then from touching the A2 zone, which we need to talk about that too, is from Hager West all the way to the South Ocean alignment, if you will, if it were to come straight out towards the ocean, towards the bay, is zoned park. And then from there, it's zoned beaches and dunes. So just to lay the groundwork here, I think in a way we've got these distinct areas. Little Beach developed per se R1, the R1 that's west of Hager, but it's also has that strip of parkland in front of it. So that is different than the people on Little Beach, and then west. The other interesting element of what's on the map, we'll get to that in a minute, are those properties on Little Beach have some really irregular, well, let's just say they're a lot bigger than you think, because they all go out into the bay. I don't know why I'm echoing. Am I echoing with you?
Yes.
Oh, you are? Okay, I don't like that. Well, anyway, so any discussion of property lines changes for them because of the way those lots were originally platted. Okay, so thank you for your comments. I think it's really important to start out this conversation right now by saying that, you know, this is a topic that's been floating around for a couple of years. It's not on any kind of fast track that I know of. It's just, it keeps coming back to us. And it was raised a couple years ago, and then we saw it again, interestingly, in the park survey. There were many comments about vegetation and tree removal. They came back through the park survey. And just, you know, individuals in the community have had concerns over time. And we have never, and we've only gotten so far as to address the beaches and dunes zone, which, as you might all recall, there was a committee for that spent quite a bit of, maybe a year, coming up with vegetation and tree removal standards for that land west of the alignment of South Ocean Avenue. But it didn't come around the corner to the parkland on the A2 zone and over to the residential land on the east end up to Neocoxie Creek. So it appears now there's interest in addressing that shoreline separate from the BAD, or maybe looking at the BAD, beaches and dunes standards that we're so much time into. Now, can I keep going? Are there any questions so far?
I have a question.
Okay.
In two places, I have a question about the wording that's here on paper. Like it's about on the page 1, There's a paragraph about the fourth or fifth paragraph down just above summary analysis. The second sentence in there says structures and vegetation removal. Does that mean structure removal and vegetation removal, or just structure, period, and vegetation removal, period?
Well, that's really important.
That verb addresses both of those things.
Yeah, because structures kind of snuck into this conversation as we started to analyze the wording that's already in place that maybe not everyone was aware of. And
You that's confusing.
yes, it is, because we didn't mean to bring up structures. And of course, that immediately raised a lot of interest in this topic because, you know, there's a lot of structures out there at Little Beach, for instance. And so let me just try and describe, when you look at the, okay, I'll get to that in just a minute. Okay, David?
No problem.
Yeah.
Carol, can I ask a question? Carol, can I ask a question?
Sure, Sharon?
I'm very confused, and I tried to check this with Chad. This is Sharon. I tried to check this with Chad. If I understood Chad correctly, the Beaches and Dunes overlay does not extend to the southernmost park area along the estuary.
That's right.
The
So
overlay.
the beaches and
Say that again. The ACE2 boundary.
no. The Beaches and Dunes overlay
Oh, Beaches and
zone
Dunes, sorry. Yeah?
does not extend to the southernmost estuary border of the park area. So
Okay.
if I'm understanding that correctly, the Beaches and Dunes overlay zone doesn't have anything to do with protecting the edge of the estuary.
Ever. I mean, anywhere.
That's right.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so Chad's got this great map up for everybody, and you can see South Ocean Avenue. What we don't have here. There, oh, good.
It's actually like that. So this area in here is in the Beaches and Dunes. This area is not.
Oh, you're right. So there's another nuance. What is that zone? Park?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is all park, but in particular, the Beaches and Dunes overlay zone uses the east, excuse me, I believe it's the east portion of Ocean Avenue to make its measurement, which ends right here. So that would mean like,
I gotcha. It's not aligned. It doesn't go straight out. So that is a mistake on my part. It turns and goes west. Okay, very good.
May I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Sorry. So since the Little Beach homeowners are in an R1 zone, they already have the 3.140 that I asked you about. They already, it looks to me like they already have a riparian zone of 50 feet.
Yes, they do.
They do.
It's already there. But it's in the R1 zone. It's not anywhere in the riparian discussion or the aquatic. It's just on its own in the R1 zone and not the R2. And it says Nicanicum River Estuary setback. All structures and uses shall, this is in the R1 zone on the Nicanicum Estuary, shall be set back 50 feet from the Nicanicum River Estuary, unless direct water access is required in conjunction with a water-dependent use. The setback shall be measured from the mean high water line. Vegetation within this setback shall be protected as specified in 6.070 5, which is where we've been focusing up until now. So Sharon, you're right. And I have just since recently come across that too, which is a big surprise because it's not in the R2 like the Neocoxie Creek setback is. It's only here in the R1. So anybody who's zoned R1 on the Mechanicsum estuary requires a 50-foot setback for structures and uses. And the same, and then if it says, and then the riparian vegetation in this setback shall be protected according with this same 50-foot setback. But then when you go to 6.0705, it should mention the Mechanicsum estuary there too, but it doesn't. So that's why this, even though the code actually covers it already right now, we're not doing anything new here. It should be in there so we don't have to go through this kind of in-depth review to figure that out. Thanks, Sharon.
I do have
Sure.
a couple.
You know,
When you're ready about that, I can explain some things if you like.
And Chad, you're a little bit garbled there, so it's hard to get your gist. Okay, so anyway, to those that are online that wrote the letters, I hope you understand what we just said, because that affects you. Which kind of changes things a little bit here as far as our discussion goes. One of the most interesting things is by starting with the aquatic conservation zone as a premise here, actually 2 years ago, and then it just got dropped. It was never really studied. It was an issue, and then it just got dropped. Is that in order to have any impact on the shoreline, any kind of impact, you'd have to have like a 200-foot setback to get up to the shoreline, because the aquatic zone is pretty far south. Now, that's not true for those odd. Okay, let's go over to Little Beach, and you can see Davis, McIntyre properties that go out into the water in those triangular kind of shapes. Those are property lines. And you know, I've come to realize that I don't think the aquatic zone is really of much help here. Unless you're building or wanting to build a pilings or a dock or something that gets used, you know, access to the water, I think that's what that zone is for, even though it talks about all these riparian and vegetation goals, it doesn't really affect it.
So Carol, for clarification here, is it such that you're saying now that this discussion and this document that you included with our planning packet doesn't really apply? Am I understanding that? Because what I understand, these lots, or the lots that I did check on, they have, the homeowners there have a lot in the R1 zone. Then they have an additional lot, a separate tax lot in front of them that is worth pretty close to zero, because it's in the estuary and sand, and it's aesthetically valuable because no one's ever going to build anything on it, I think, that I would know about. So this A2 thing doesn't affect them, right? I mean, is that where you're at now?
Well, if the conversation is narrowed to tree removal and riparian vegetation on the shoreline, I think the answer is yes, because we've got either parkland or R1 zoning on the shoreline. And the A2 is too far away from the shoreline. Now, I don't know what happens at mean high water or other, ordinary high water marks, if that might get up there. It probably does at times. But in general, yes, I don't think Chad, you can jump in here anytime because you can talk about tree removal in terms of how it's enforced now. And that might help with the background.
I'd be happy to add a little bit of information if this is a good time.
Yeah, please go, because I think we're trying to figure out if we need to do anything or what it is.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. A little bit muffled.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Chad.
I can hear you crystal clear, Austin.
Go ahead, she said.
So I guess what I know is, we need to look at mean tide level and mean high tide level. We also need to look at the zoning and how that kind of plays out in these maps. So just to familiarize ourselves with the zoning, here's the map without all the zoning on it. And to make it a little easier, I'm going to take off the tax lots. Actually, before I do, the tax lots updated as of April 14th. These areas right in here, if you can see my cursor moving, these are extended portions of the parcels that are owned by the folks in Little Beach. Townsend, Davis, McIntyre, and such, and more. So their land actually kind of goes pretty far out here. So to give you an idea, I'm going to take the tax lot maps off. I'm going to lay on the zoning from the comprehensive plan. I'm going to back out a little bit too. So we have the A2 zone, which is out in this location here. We have the park, which is in blue, the park, which is in green, and then the R1 zone, which is in yellow. So the A2 zone is obviously quite a distance from the shoreline. I'll measure this just to show you how far. From the A2 zone to halfway up the bank, we're looking at about 124 feet from the A2 zone. So the A2 zone, from what I understand, is basically mean high tide level, according to Tom Horning. I talked to him a little bit about this over the last couple of days. The mean high tide level is approximately, and I'm going to use something else to show this here. Can I use a drawing tool? Okay, can you folks see the spotlight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the mean tide level. And the mean high tide level is at about right here in the green.
But Chad, that's not the area we're
The
talking
mean
about.
level is,
Aha.
I'm sorry, what was that?
That's park. I think we're talking about the A2 zone.
Yeah, okay.
It's just-
So the A2 zone is way out here that I could end with. What other questions do you have?
I would just like to point out that, Chad, when you move over to where the Little Beach residents are, we do not have the buffer of the parks. The A2 zone is much closer to our residential property. And so is the mean high tide. Basically,
So I'll measure
the
that
park
for you
zone
here.
stops at Hager.
Right.
So that's the area of concern.
How far is
Looks
that?
like we're about 100 feet on that. From the A2 zone to the bank is about 100 feet, maybe a little less.
So all structures shall be set back 50 feet from the Mechanicsburg River estuary. Where is the Mechanicsburg River estuary? line.
That is
Okay, so it says
mean.
all structures and uses shall be set back 50 feet from the Nicanatum River estuary, and the setback shall be measured from the mean high water line. So the mean high water line, and I'm going to try to highlight that, and this is all approximate that I've been doing kind of using Google Earth and all that. The mean high water line is about here.
And Chad, that's horizontal
That is
measurement.
at 6.5
That's
feet.
Chad, that's horizontal measurement, correct?
Yeah, it would be similar to this. It would be horizontal, you know, along with the bank of the estuary. So along with the houses would be horizontal to that. And it's out here about here, which is 6.5 mean high tide.
You might notice that between the mean high tide line and the bank of the estuary where the residents are, there are absolutely no trees and very little vegetation.
So if I was to measure about where the mean high tide line is from the bank, it's about 50 feet. It's very close.
So
So the
that,
50-foot setback is perfect.
that makes sense.
That makes sense.
I would think that you know, this is kind of just going around 50 feet when the houses were built. I know the houses were not built. The houses were built several years ago. I've lived in this community long enough to know that what was there several years ago and what is there today are two different things. And where that mean high tide may be now could have been different when the houses were built. I think the concern is that, I'm going to paraphrase here, but I think the concern is that the residents along there are going, okay, we've done our 50 feet back, but this document that Carol put together is 200 feet back. And my thing is that if you do 200 feet from the A2 zone, we don't do that when two different zones butt up to each other. We don't say that if you live in an R2 zone next to an R1 that you can't have any R2 things in 200 feet from the R1 zone. I know, Carol, it's not the same thing. It seems like
No, you're right.
it's putting restrictions on one piece of zoning from another zone. That doesn't make sense to me.
No, we have evolved in the last week.
You've evolved.
Yeah, that's, you know, that is now a terrible idea.
Okay, if that's a terrible idea,
The more we understand the actual ground and the zones and the definitions and the various sections of the code, I mean, we're still tonight realizing some things. So this is a really useful exercise, if nothing else, to really dig deep in the weeds and figure out what we've got. So the 200 was an arbitrary attempt to say that generally the A2 zone is pretty far away from the bank, but that was last week.
okay. So
It's
Carol,
pretty darn close.
Carol, we need to take
Hey,
care
I
of.
have a question here. This is Russ speaking, and I just generally speaking, since the A2 seems to be in the water, where the river and the tidal action creates its own natural. If any vegetation grows, it's part of Mother Nature's plan. Why are we screwing around with this? I mean, nobody's out there planting or harvesting, as far as I can tell, in the river. The river and tidal areas.
Well, it's a good question, and the reason we are is because the topic came back again about the 4 trees that were removed in the winter at the end of Wellington Avenue. 4, not 5, 5 requires a permit, 4 trees under 12 inches in diameter at 4.5 feet tall were cut and then sort of negligently tossed over the edge of the bank. And wasn't there a way to stop that? And that's how this has come to where it is today.
I see, okay.
So this is David. I'm wondering if Ginny would entertain an idea to table this discussion.
I certainly would suggest that, David, to table this as you know, we even looked tonight at the map. There's some more A2 in there that you've just found tonight that would affect other people's houses, I'm sure, that had no idea it would affect their house. If we're talking about vegetation, there's that A2 zone, like whoever said it, you know, it's salt water. It's not really growing much. And the trees were in the park area or abutting up to it. So is there something that needs to be taken care of tonight, Carol?
No, this was purely discussion, kind of a work session. And
All right.
Everybody's input helped us, I think, understand better where we are today. And I don't see why, even the, Jenny, as you said, you go up Neocoxie Creek over there on the right, up all the way to 7th Street is aquatic zone because it's influenced by the tides. And yet that R1 standard is the same standard of the 50-foot setback is already in place.
Okay.
This is Sharon. May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Sharon.
Okay. So it looks like the Little Beach area is covered under the R1 zones. So the glaring omission in covering the bank of the estuary is the park zone. Is that correct?
Yes, you're right. In fact, if there is no comparable statement in the code for the park zone, I think. Let me look again. But right, that's, I mean, I knew we weren't finished yet, but that's the other issue once we take care of Little Beach, is what to do with the park zone. And I think there's some irregular park boundaries out there, right, Chad? Hold on here.
Yeah. I mean, the lines are a little difficult, but park boundaries are as they are on the map that you can get online.
Well, and that's just city.
And that's city owned.
Correct. City of Gerhardt.
Okay.
So the question is, does the planning commission need to come up with verbiage protecting the estuary bank in the park zone?
I know. Hold on a minute. Yeah, there's very few standards in that park zone at all about anything other than any overlay zones, which would be the aquatic, maybe. Yeah, so that, Sharon, you're right. If you thought that same language that's in the R1 zone about the 50-foot setback for riparian vegetation protection should be in the park zone, I guess the question is what other park lands, I mean, I guess it would be a statement just referring to where it's relevant, right?
Yeah, it's just referring to the estuary.
So is the planning commission interested in making that kind of a fairly easy amendment.
I'm going to, okay, let's finish one thing at a time.
Okay,
A2, are we done discussing that and we are going to leave things as they are? Is this?
well,
do we-
no, I think we're still on the topic in general. The question, I think we all agree that we've taken out anything changes to the A2. And
All
that now we've made it clear to the property owners and look that what their standard already is for vegetation removal and structures as it affects them. The only thing we really haven't covered, as Sharon's pointed out, is that strip from Wellington to wherever the end of the park zone is on the shoreline.
Okay.
Might have some riparian vegetation language in it, protection language added.
All right. So then Carol, you would need to come with that language that would need to be added, because we need to make sure that before we would do anything, we need to make sure that the city residents know about that, correct?
That's right. Now, you know, I don't know that we want to add another layer of language. We might just use the same language in terms of sort of cross-referencing and within our existing provisions, or we might create new language. I don't know, but yeah, that broadens that topic. It narrows it at first, and now, you know, where exactly do we want to go with it? I don't know for sure. But
Does any of this fall underneath the park master plan?
no, the parks really wants to stay away from this kind of stuff because they're trying to work on. It's just a little bit of a stretch. Do you agree, Austin?
Yeah, I think so. I was just going to suggest it would be nice to look at the parks zoning language at the next meeting and just kind of see. We all have time to look at it, and then if you want to make any recommendations based on that R1 code with the 50-foot setback, and we can just kind of look at that before we make any decisions right now. But I think that the Parks
Good idea.
but yeah, I think the Parks Master's Plan Committee we're looking at more recommendations for enhancing the parks themselves and what uses are there, and not so much the language around restrictions. So.
Well, or vegetation, I think. Well,
yeah, we want to stay away from vegetation.
Yeah,
So,
we may go so far as to talk about what kind of vegetation is preferred in the city parks, but I don't know. You know, we'll bring it up.
now, let's by consensus. Do I have consensus by the commission that we have thoroughly discussed the A2 zone as affects Little Beach at this point, and to take up a discussion about the park zoning and maybe some additional language to take care of the vegetation there. Correct?
Jenny?
Yeah.
And Madam President, may I ask one other question?
No. Yes.
This is a short one. I think that for the people that are listening and for the people that have went ahead and submitted letters, I think also a clearer definition of what the problem is. I don't think that that's been clearly defined as what the problem, what are we trying to fix? Unless I cut out there for a little while as I was having some technical difficulties.
I think, Chad, my problem was I didn't know what the problem was we were trying to fix. I knew that trees had been removed in another area, and I never quite understood how it got to A2 in the R1 zone, which wasn't in the area. So that's my confusion.
There was some conversation. There was some conversations about how to limit people from being able to do those sorts of things within the park zone or on their property potentially, but mostly within the park zone.
Okay.
Now, yeah, and those trees were cut from private property.
Right.
In the R1. In the R1.
Yeah. Stephanie?
Yeah, what I would like us to do is for the A2 zone amendment considerations, which was the topic that we began with, I'd like to see that tabled and put away and a new topic being brought up about what to do with the park zone that abuts the rest of the estuary. It's a separate topic.
Yes. David?
I agree with Stephanie. I think we should put the A2 zone discussion to bed for a while. And a new item of discussion would be the interface of park zone and the A2 zone.
Okay.
Is that what Stephanie said?
Yeah. And Austin brought it up. Terry, you have any input?
Nothing to add.
Okay. And Russ, you have anything?
No, I think that's the proper path that Stephanie brought up.
All right. And Sharon brought it up. So that's where we'll go, Carol. And Chad, is that okay with you?
Thank you. Excellent. It takes a village.
All right. I thank all the people that wrote letters for us. You certainly clarified your position, and we always appreciate getting letters.
Always.
So let's look at the summary of possible BLI, housing related amendment recommendation. Carol?
Yes, I'm looking for all my papers.
Hi, Jeff Strange here. Just want to say thank you very much and sign out. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, what you received in your packet was a summary strategies to address current and future housing needs. An excerpt that came out of the buildable lands inventory work that we just finished, specific to Gearhart. And my original idea was to give you a one-page summary. And I just didn't see any reason to spend a lot of time trying to sift all this stuff out. There are actual recommendations here to do that. So I just gave you what's in the report. And we have a number of things that we could do in the city to attract some more affordable housing. And it may require adding more R3 zoning. It may require allowing for attached single-family homes. They call them duplexes sometimes, or they call them attached single-family homes. We may rethink the provision that if you own one 50 by 100 lot next to another 50 by 100 lot, and they're both yours, you have to have 10,000 square feet to build on those legal lots. Each one is legal, but the zone, R1 zone, requires 10,000. So you can't build two homes on those two legal lots. You can only build one. If we loosened that up, there could be more infill. We could promote accessory dwelling units. Everybody know what those are? That if you've got a house on a lot, you could possibly build a smaller accessory dwelling on the same lot, subject to certain size limits and other provisions to make sure it functions right. They're very common now everywhere in Oregon, but we don't allow them. People ask about them every now and then, zoning wise, and we do not allow them. And they're probably the primary reason is the septic, although I don't think it's really been tested because these would be smaller septic systems for likely a one-bedroom unit. And just for now, I'm just going to stop there. There's lots of things we can do here. And when and if we make any amendments, we have to do it in accordance with the statewide housing goal 10. And it will be a pretty in-depth process. The consultant has told you this level of effort, relative level of effort in his page one table, page 1, 2, and half of 3 are all these different ideas. And then he says how much effort and how much cost is this going to take to do these things. That's a useful guide for us to figure out, do we have the staff? Do we have the budget? Which ones would be priorities, and when and how can we do these things? This is a very useful bit of work we did. There's a lot of good ideas. I don't know where they fall on our priority list as a city, and if our budget, which was just finished by the council or is in the process of being finished, even has considered anything for housing. So I'm going to stop there and see what you have to say about it.
Okay, so this is a time for commissioners to have some input. Terry, do you have some input?
Well, I really appreciate the work that Carol put into this, and I find it incredibly useful. And I'm the one who brought this up because we had that workshop with the city council where the guy came and gave the presentation. And I was thinking, hey, we really need to stay ahead of the curve because Gerhardt's been notorious for falling behind the curve. And I'm not sure that I'm the only one who makes this a priority. And if it is a priority, I'm not sure how to move forward with it. So I would like to, if it is a priority, I'd like to hear other people say, hey, is it or isn't it, or it's not worth pursuing at this time. And if it is a priority, get some direction from the staff how to move forward with this.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Russ, do you have some input?
Well, yeah, I am. I guess I'm sort of. I'm not too keen on the auxiliary dwelling unit, and as Carol mentioned, the septic situation. In fact, I think some years back, early in my time on the commission, I asked the sanitarian at the county level what their opinion was about, like a duplex on a single septic system, and they did not, even though you could do it legally in terms of the square footage and the bedrooms involved in the duplex to a single system, but their concern was one of the residents consumes thousands of gallons a day and the other resident consumes tens of gallons a day, and the system overloads, and then who rebuilds the system? So I know Carol mentioned that. My feeling in general is that I think if we're going to have additional properties added, the urban growth boundary, that's where we would be better served to say, if you're coming into the city, we expect you to have 20% R2 or 20, some number, create a number that says, if you're coming in, you need to provide housing or lot structure within the categories that we deem necessary. Other than that, I think there's, we talk about lot sizes and all that have been specified, and if the lot sizes allow for more density, then that's where we're going to get our density. I guess just generally speaking, I'd hate to see us do something to meet a state standard that screws up the city or the village, by creating a density that 20 years from now we think, what the hell just happened? So that's my concern, is that we take a very, long look at it, or a look with our eyes wide open, essentially.
Okay, good input, Russ. Sharon, did you have something?
Yes, I actually have four questions. Being new to all this, I have 4 questions for Carol. Number one is there a legal mandate as to how much affordable housing the city of Gerhardt must have?
No.
Okay. My second question is, how do planners assess the maximum capacity of population for a given city?
Are you talking about this buildable lands inventory? Okay, say that again. How does the city or planner assess the maximum?
No. So I'm kind of following along the lines of what Russ was just saying. So I'm sitting here and I read everything you put out, which was very detailed. And then I took a step back and I'm thinking to myself, what do we want Gerhardt to be like 10 years from now or 20 years from now? And do we want to have a lot of, I don't know, apartments or townhouses? What do we want the city to look like? So then my question was, is there a way that a person, a planner like you, has to assess the maximum capacity population that you would want to have?
Well, first of all, I would say that the comprehensive plan and the zoning code right now are quite clear that no, they do not want high density. And so that's why Gerhardt remains the same. But a lot of that has to do with the septic limitations, because we don't have a city sewer system, and that probably more than anything affects our maximum density despite how much land we have. And so you'll see there is very little R3 zoning in the city. And there's never been any push to expand that. There's really been never any push in terms of planning to try and change what we have had since really the 70s.
Well, Sharon, this is David. Don't we typically rely on population data from Portland State when we're projecting population in the county?
Well, yeah, that's it. Projecting population is another side of what you're talking about, projecting or how to assess what there's two things. What can we expect to have for population growth? And that's based on Portland State Census data, which everybody complains is notoriously low. So that's one way to figure out how big of an urban growth boundary you need based on that kind of growth. Then there's the zoning and the policies in your plan. And if you have policies that say really strongly, we want more affordable housing, this is how we're going to get it. We allow ADUs, we're going to have apartments, we're really going to go for the more types and tenures of housing styles. And Gerhardt's never done that. Gerhardt is primarily single family. The state is not going to mandate us to do that, although maybe someday they will. But Gerhardt is not metro, where you do have a lot more push and a little more heavy-handed legislation statewide to get metro and urban areas to go higher density. Our septic will continue to constrain us. And so we just say that's it. We are a small city. We have fairly low population growth, and it's just status quo by policy as well as septic.
Okay. Another question I had was, is there a point at which the amount of affordable housing that a city has where it would start to decrease the city property values?
Ooh, not sure I want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole.
I don't think you could ask a more difficult question.
You mean like discrimination and redlining and
Yep.
No, not in Gerhardt anyway.
If we start discussing that in public, we're going to be on the front page of the newspaper.
Well,
Is RJ still
okay,
here?
and then my last question was, what is affordable housing? What price range at this point in time is considered affordable housing?
I don't think that's been defined.
No. And Sharon, from my viewpoint, I do not use the term affordable housing because affordable to a millionaire is totally different from someone that's a waitress at the restaurant. I like to refer to as workforce housing. I think that is a more accurate picture of what is missing up and down the coast.
Yeah, I would add the goal 10, state goal 10 housing does not put any number, because that would be a changing number over time, a dollar amount. But what they do promote is a mix of types and tenures. That is multifamily apartments, attached housing, single family, manufactured homes, a mix, and tenures would be, obviously those have different price tags on them. So that's the way they define it. And that's the goal, is to have, really in the simplest manner, types and tenures of housing to meet the needs of all the residents of Gearhart. Now, we already start out with 60% of, over 60% of our homes being second homes, and it's just a different egg, you know, than a metro city like Tigard, for instance. It's a unique place that, and it's such a size that the state doesn't mandate small cities.
Yeah. Those are all my questions. I guess I would just reiterate what Russ said. And I think that, you know, in thinking about all this and deciding how much of what kind of housing or what kind of zoning we're going to have, you know, we want to have the long range, you know, goal in mind as to what kind of community we want to be living in 10 or 20 years.
And we do. We have that. And we should, if you want to look at the comp plan housing goals, they're all there spelled out, residential and housing. And when you're at a point as a commission that you might want to initiate some changes to those policies, then that's where we would start. Or if somebody else wants to sponsor it, a person could, a resident, city council, whoever wants to sponsor that kind of a initiative, it's always available.
Okay, thank you.
Stephanie, your hand was raised. Unmute yourself.
There we go. Thanks. I just wanted to agree with Russ as well, and thinking that maybe we can pick this conversation up again if and when we talk about the urban growth boundary, or when we talk about what's going to happen with the elementary school. That was it.
All right, David, did you have something more to add? Unmute yourself.
Nothing to add at this time. Now my wife just told me to mute myself.
Oh, I know. It's tough. Okay, Austin.
I'll be the devil's advocate on this one. I'm actually interested in the accessory dwelling units as a conversation to have, specifically because we've already got rid of the whole vacation rental issue in Gearhart, which is basically the main concern in most communities when it comes to accessory dwellings. And really, in a sense, because we are a unique community in that the R1 is the majority, it also is the largest land mass or largest land parcels in the community. And if we are really going to be looking at adding any more potential for additional density, there is some room in there. And a lot of the newer houses, a lot of the bigger houses pretty much take up a majority of that square footage of those lots. So probably adding accessory dwelling units, since most of the R1s are pretty limited, but some of those lots, older cottages or houses that are on larger lots could have the potential to do that and provide more workforce housing in the community without really diminishing any property value as well. So that's just my thoughts on that. And if we really want to take it up at some point or talk about it more, I'm open to that.
Okay. Thank you, Austin. I can speak for the neighborhood I live in, as we know that, yeah, your house is not supposed to cover any more than, I believe, 35% of the lot. Carol, I think that's right. Is that what it
Oh,
is?
lot coverage for R1, I think so.
I think it's 35%. And I can tell you probably about 60% of the people in here have accessory buildings. And some of them are as big as, I think, my first house. So it's amazing what people can shove on their lots. So, and to always being behind, you know, Gerhardt was the leader in vacation home rentals and putting a lid on that. And we're seeing the communities that we're surrounded by also putting lids on those and controlling them. So sometimes Gerhardt can be ahead of the curve. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting study. I think that we need to keep this document in front of us and be aware of it as we move on through the year. Hoping that sometime we can get together and actually I can see all of you, because this is weird. It's just weird. Talking.
Okay. This is Terry again, and I appreciate and agree with what everybody had to say. And there's nobody who wants to keep Gerhardt more like Gerhardt than I do. You saw that during the battles with the rental thing. And I think you may have misunderstood my motive of bringing this up. I always feel like Gerhardt's under attack. And when people come at us and want to develop something, I want to have control over where they can do it and what they can do it. And that study said that the shortage that we have is land available for workforce housing. And if somebody comes in and wants to develop like the school and say, hey, I'm going to build something here, we can point over to somewhere else and say, hey, that's already zoned. You can go build it over there. And what I was really looking for was kind of look at our zoning and figure out, do we really, as a planning commission, have control to keep Gerhardt the way Gerhardt is? And I think all of you, and I can agree with Austin that we do need to look at an alternative. But I just want to make sure when somebody comes before us, we're not floundering around. And we can say, hey, this is where you can go do this. So that's all I would.
Yeah, I totally understand, Terry. I think we all understand that. We want to be prepared for anything. And like Carol has said tonight, we do have that comprehensive plan that does talk about limiting density. So it's a process. No matter who comes up with what, it's going to be a process. So I totally get what you're talking about.
Well, I feel a lot more comfortable. I hear an echo where I hear that where people are coming from.